Thugs harass a black girl in a wheelchair, but they didn't know a royal guard was watching everything. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and follow for more powerful stories that will stay with you. Now let's begin. The midday sun blazed overhead, casting a golden shimmer across the polished stone and towering domes of the Capitol Heritage Museum. Its marble columns gleamed under the heat, a beacon that pulled in crowds of visitors from every corner of the country. Outside the main entrance, a line of tourists shuffled forward, cell phones lifted, snapping photos of the ceremonial guards who stood like statues, unmoved by the chaos around them. Their red uniforms, sharply creased and adorned with gleaming brass buttons, spoke of tradition, duty, and pride. Among these sentinels stood Ron Holt, his back straight, his gaze fixed, every inch of him a portrait of control. Ron had grown accustomed to the daily parade of tourists, whispers, stares, the occasional polite wave. His role wasn't to entertain or engage, but to preserve the dignity of the institution behind him. Movement, for him, was rare, reserved only for moments when the security of the premises was truly compromised. But today carried an edge. There was something in the air, a static that made the hairs on his neck stand. His instincts stirred uneasily. From the corner of his vision, Ron spotted a knot of men near the courtyard benches. They weren't part of any tour group, rough around the edges, with a swagger that suggested they were here for something other than architecture or history. But it wasn't them that drew Ron's attention. It was the young girl with them. A child, maybe 8 or 9, with deep brown skin, sat quietly in a wheelchair decorated with bright stickers and colorful streamers. Her name, Ron would later learn, was Haley. She wore a simple white t-shirt and a pair of jeans with one cuff rolled up slightly. Despite the intimidating men surrounding her, Haley's eyes held a quiet defiance, a calm that felt out of place. The tallest of the men stood behind her, laughing at something the others had said. Their words didn't reach Ron clearly, but their tone did. One of them pointed toward the chest of Haley's shirt, where a small row of honorary pins was attached. Ron squinted. Those weren't toys. Those were awards, earned through charity events, advocacy for accessibility rights, even speaking at a school board meeting about inclusive education. Ron didn't need to know the details to recognize something honorable when he saw it. Haley shifted in her chair, hands folding tightly in her lap. One of the men leaned down, his smirk ugly. "Where'd you steal those from, huh?" he sneered. Haley raised her chin. "They were given to me," she said clearly, voice steady despite the tension. "I earned them." Her quiet dignity hit Ron like a shot to the chest. He adjusted his footing slightly, a barely visible shift, but it meant something. Guards didn't interfere in verbal scuffles, not unless someone crossed the line. Still, Ron kept watching. The way the tallest man loomed over Haley, the way another one reached out like he might grab at the pins. Every alarm in Ron's body was going off. Haley flinched back slightly as one man stretched a hand forward. "Don't touch them," she said, this time her voice sharper, steel cutting through her small frame. "She got a mouth on her," one of them muttered, nudging the other. "Bet she thinks she's some kind of hero." Another reached down, his dirty fingernail brushing one of her pins. "That's so?" he said mockingly. "You saved the world in that little chair of yours?" Haley's eyes narrowed. "I don't have to walk to stand up for myself." Ron felt his jaw tighten. His orders were clear, but something deeper, older, rumbled inside him. The men hadn't breached the museum. They hadn't threatened anyone on official record. But every part of Ron screamed that standing still now would mean failing the very ideals his uniform stood for. The medals, the honor, the courage. But he couldn't ignore a potential threat to a defenseless old soldier. Over the years, he'd mastered the art of reading body language. Right now, every signal from that group said they were looking for trouble. Haley tried to sidestep them. "Excuse me," she murmured, gently turning the wheels of her chair. "Not so fast," the tall thug snapped, stepping into her path. He leaned over her with a sneer, eyes flicking to the pins and small medals on her vest, colorful, proud little symbols of community work, school leadership, and activism for disabled children. He shoved her wheelchair just slightly, enough to jar her balance. "What's all this?" he mocked. "Trying to guilt folks into tossing you their spare change?" "Look at her," another chimed in, circling her chair. Whole act laid out like a sad little circus. Black kid in a wheelchair with shiny pins? That's a scam if I ever saw one. Haley's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. "I'm not asking anyone for money," she said softly. "I'm just waiting for my mom. She went to get me some ice cream." The group erupted with laughter. "Yeah, right," one of them snorted. "Always got a story, don't they? Can't believe a damn word y'all say." The tallest one reached out suddenly and flicked one of her pins. "What's this one for? Best sob story?" Without warning, he ripped it off and tossed it to the ground. "No, please," Haley cried, her voice cracking. The man stomped it under his boot. "Oops, guess that one wasn't real either." Another thug stepped behind her, pushing at the handles of her wheelchair. "Bet she ain't even paralyzed. Let's see if this whole thing's fake." Haley's eyes widened. Don't do that, please," she begged, her breath quickening. Her legs tensed, useless beneath her, as fear flooded her expression. "Let's flip it," one of them growled. "Want to see if she still plays helpless when she's face down on the concrete." "Please stop," she whimpered. "You're hurting me." Ron inhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. Before they could move another inch, Ron was there. He caught the wrist of the man closest to the chair. "Not going to happen," he said, low and sharp. For a second, the two locked eyes. The thug jerked back, but Ron didn't let go. His grip tightened, firm without excess force. "Leave her alone," Ron said, voice firm and unshaken. The thugs turned, startled. The tall one squinted, confused for a moment, then sneered. "You talking to us, statue boy?" Ron didn't flinch. "She asked you to let her through." A flicker of surprise passed across their faces. Maybe they hadn't expected a guard to move, let alone speak. Haley, still trembling in her chair, looked up at Ron with wide, watery eyes, somewhere between hope and disbelief. "What, she your cousin or something?" one thug spat, stepping forward. "We're just messing with her." Ron's tone didn't shift. "Trouble or not, it stops now." The leader's smirk turned hard. "Or what? You gonna swing that little toy sword on your hip?" He stepped closer, invading Ron's space. Another thug moved behind, eyeing Ron like a wolf circling prey. Still, Ron didn't retreat. "I don't need a weapon to stop you." For a second, tension held like a coiled spring. Then the tall one lunged, aiming straight for Haley again, maybe trying to grab her chair, or worse. But Ron moved first. In one swift motion, he caught the thug's arm mid-swing, twisting it down with trained precision. "Ah! Let go!" the man barked, stumbling. Another one charged from behind, swinging a clumsy fist. Ron ducked, pivoted, and elbowed the man square in the ribs, sending him wheezing backward into a bench. A third thug yelled, "Get him!" and lunged, but Ron sidestepped him and kicked out the back of his knee. The man collapsed with a grunt, face smacking the concrete. Haley gasped, hands flying to her mouth. She couldn't look away. The fourth man hesitated now, glancing between his groaning friends and the calm, unwavering guard in front of him. He cursed under his breath and ran at Ron with both arms raised. Ron grabbed the man's wrist midair, yanked him forward, and flipped him flat onto his back. The man howled, slapping the pavement, dazed. The tall thug scrambled to his feet, holding his wrist. "Screw this!" he barked. "He's a damn lunatic. Y'all want to get arrested or what?" The second groaned, clutching his side. "Let's go!" one shouted, already halfway across the plaza. Finally, the tall man stepped back, chest heaving with shallow breaths. He exchanged uneasy glances with his crew. Whatever they'd expected from this uniformed man, it sure wasn't someone who knew how to fight like that. "Screw this," one of them muttered, rubbing at a bruised arm, eyes darting toward the gathering crowd and raised phones. The ringleader shot Ron a venomous look, then sneered at Haley. You lucked out, kid! He spat near her feet. Next time, no hero in a monkey suit's gonna be around to save you. He turned and stalked off, the rest following with curses under their breath and a trail of shame behind them. A few spectators clapped softly, while others looked around in awe, as though trying to process what they had just witnessed. Haley's small shoulders sagged with relief. Her knuckles still gripped the wheels of her chair tightly. Ron knelt slightly beside her, the sharpness in his gaze now replaced with something gentler. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Haley gave a shaky nod, her voice barely a whisper. "I think so. Do you need help finding your mom?" "She went to get ice cream. She'll be back soon." Ron nodded, then stood protectively beside her, casting a watchful eye over the crowd. A few people stepped forward, offering water, kind words, or just a reassuring presence near the shaken girl. One woman wiped her eyes and whispered, "I've never seen a guard move like that." Another man added, "He saved that little girl's life." Haley reached down to adjust the pins on her vest. One had been nearly torn loose. "These are from school," she said softly, almost to herself. "They gave them to me when I spoke about disability rights." Ron looked at her, then placed a steady hand on the back of her wheelchair. "You've earned every one of them. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Neither of them knew what this act of defiance might mean for Ron's future with the guard, but that didn't matter right now. What mattered was that he'd done what was right. And sometimes, that was all that mattered. Ron Holt didn't return to his post right away. After the thugs retreated, he stayed by Haley's side, making sure the little girl wasn't too shaken to stay alone. Onlookers murmured with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Some came forward to check on Haley, offering water or a place to sit. Others snapped photos of Ron, fascinated that a royal guard had broken formation so decisively. "Are you sure you're all right?" Ron asked, scanning Haley's face. "Yes," Haley replied. She patted down her vest, relieved to find most of her pins still there. "Thank you again. I don't know what got into those men." Ron nodded, though a note of worry tugged at him. The group had seemed hostile for no clear reason. Something about them lingered in his mind. Maybe it was the way they sneered at those pins, or how their leader threatened to rip one off. Ron couldn't shake the idea that they might come back. He promised himself he would keep watch for any sign of trouble. Moments later, a fellow guard approached. His eyes darted between Ron and Haley. "We need to speak with you," he told Ron in a quiet, urgent tone. He glanced at Haley with concern. "I'm glad you're safe, sweetheart," he said, then turned back to Ron. "But the captain wants a word. Protocol's been broken." Ron felt a jolt of anxiety. He had known the risk. Stepping away from his post without explicit orders went against everything drilled into them during training. He looked at Haley, who caught the shift in his expression. "Go," Haley said, offering a soft smile. "I'll be fine. You have your duties." Ron hesitated, worried about leaving her alone in case those men lingered nearby. But the little girl gave a nod of quiet reassurance. A few concerned bystanders remained around them, forming a small protective circle. Ron exhaled, straightening his shoulders. "All right," he said. "If you need anything, I know where to find you," Haley finished, tapping one wheel gently. Reluctantly, Ron followed his fellow guard. They wove through a group of tourists until they reached a discreet side entrance. There, Captain Leslie Quinn awaited them, her posture stiff. She wore a stern expression that made Ron's stomach twist. He stood at attention, preparing for a reprimand. "You stepped out of formation," said Captain Quinn, her voice calm but edged with authority. "Care to explain why?" Ron drew a slow breath, steadying himself. "I saw a young civilian. She was being cornered and harassed by a group of men. She was in danger. I made a judgment call to protect her." Quinn's eyes flicked toward the wide glass window behind her, which overlooked the quiet courtyard still echoing with the day's tension. "I understand why you did what you did," she said after a pause. "But our rules are there for a reason. Structure is what keeps chaos in check. If every guard left their post because something felt wrong, we'd have no order left to maintain." Her gaze returned to him, cool but not without nuance. That said, you prevented a violent assault on a child. That deserves recognition. Ron lowered his gaze, a flicker of humility passing through him. I accept full responsibility for my actions. You'll be placed under internal review, she continued, her tone remaining even. Your conduct will be evaluated. Until then, you'll remain on active duty. But your performance will be closely monitored, understood? Yes, ma'am. He'd expected nothing less. Good. Dismissed. But listen carefully, Holt. Next time, weigh the consequences. Ron didn't answer. He simply saluted and turned away. He understood Quinn's stance, understood it down to the bones, but none of it changed what had felt right in the moment. Protecting Haley wasn't a regret. As he stepped back into the courtyard, a storm of emotion rippled beneath the surface. Relief at having escaped harsher punishment, uncertainty about what came next, and a gnawing concern for Haley's well-being. That evening, after his shift had ended and the sun dipped low over the museum lawn, Ron found himself walking the grounds. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for. Maybe a glimpse of the girl, maybe just peace of mind. He eventually spotted her near a quiet path beside the reflecting pool. Haley was resting in her chair, spinning one of the wheels slowly, her gaze cast over the water. As he approached, she turned. Her face lit up faintly. You came back, she said. Ron gave a soft nod. I was hoping we could talk for a bit. He sat down on the edge of the bench nearby, keeping a respectful distance. How are you holding up? I'm okay, she replied. Still kind of shaken, but I've been through worse. Her hands moved to the front of her vest, gently brushing the crooked row of pins still clinging there. One had nearly fallen off during the scuffle. She looked up at him, the sunlight catching in her eyes. Did you get in trouble because of me? Ron hesitated. I'm being reviewed, he admitted. I might get a formal warning, but I'll take whatever comes. That's not fair, Haley said, lips pressed into a thin line. You did the right thing. Everyone saw it. Ron gave a soft smile. Doing the right thing doesn't always mean avoiding trouble. I knew what I was risking when I left my post. She was quiet for a beat, then nodded. You remind me of someone my grandma used to talk about. He was in the army. She said he told her that a soldier doesn't follow rules blindly. He stands for people, even when it's hard. Ron's heart stirred, though his face remained composed. That's one of the best compliments I've ever gotten. They sat there in silence for a few minutes, letting the stillness wash over them. Haley's gaze drifted to the Capitol dome in the distance, her fingers absently tracing the rim of a pin on her chest. Ron felt a question rising inside him, one that had been pressing at him since the incident. Do you know those guys? He asked gently. The ones who came after you? Haley's jaw tensed a little. No, never seen them before. But I don't think it was random. They didn't like what I was wearing, what I stood for. Maybe they didn't like that I looked like me. Ron clenched his hand against his knee. His gut had told him the same thing. Haley straightened one of the pins on her vest, the largest one. It was scratched but still shining faintly. She tapped it twice, her expression shifting. These aren't just decorations. They carry memories of conflict, bullets, scrapes with death. I never expected to face hostility here, though, of all places. Eventually, Ron broke the silence. Did you know those men? Haley gave a small shake of her head. Never seen them before, but they didn't feel random. Like the way they moved, the way they went after me. It felt like they had a plan. Ron nodded slowly. I thought the same. They weren't just a bunch of punks messing around. It felt intentional, coordinated, like they'd been watching. Maybe they saw your pins, assumed you were trying to get money from people. Haley gave a lopsided shrug. Maybe, but I don't even carry cash. Not really. I mean, what would I need it for? She let out a half laugh. I'm a kid in a wheelchair, not running a lemonade stand. Ron smiled faintly at her dry humor. The moment of levity passed quickly as he remembered the venom in the men's eyes, the way they spit their words like weapons. "If anything ever happens again, you come find us," Ron said. "The guard station is always there. I'll help you however I can." Haley looked at him, something soft in her eyes. "Thanks. Maybe I'll stop by sometime. Even just to talk. Sitting alone gets boring." Ron gently touched her arm. "You're welcome anytime." They parted as the sky dimmed, the last light of day brushing the edges of the reflecting pool. Ron made his way back to the barracks, his thoughts churning. The duty he felt went far beyond commands and uniforms. It was rooted in something deeper, human decency. And still, a quiet unease tugged at him, a sense that this wasn't over, that those men weren't done, that Haley might still be in danger. That night, Ron's sleep was fitful. He turned in bed, haunted by the moment he had stepped away from his post, by the way the thugs looked at her like she was less than human. In a dream, he wandered a corridor that stretched endlessly. At the far end, Haley's voice called out for help, echoing across the marble halls. She wore her school vest, but the medals had fallen, scattered at her feet. Ron tried to run, but his legs refused to move. He was stuck in place like wading through wet cement. He woke with a jolt, sweat damp on his brow, heart hammering in the darkness. By morning, Ron stood stiffly at attention in the training yard. The sky overhead was pale in threatening rain. He could feel the eyes of fellow guards on him, some curious, some filled with silent respect. The rumors had spread, and everyone knew he had broken protocol. But Ron held his posture with quiet resolve. During a pause in drills, Ava Sinclair, one of the few guards he truly trusted, pulled him aside near the gear shed. "I heard about what happened," she murmured, glancing over her shoulder. "4 guys, right?" Ron gave a short sigh. "Yeah, they weren't exactly trained fighters, but there were 4. Ava's brow lifted, half impressed, half concerned. That was bold, brave. But you know how tight Quinn is about protocol. Ron offered a dry smile. "She didn't throw me out, yet." "You always were the stubborn one," she said, nudging him gently. "Just keep your eyes open, okay? There's talk going around, that those guys might be tied to something bigger." Ron stiffened. "Tied to who?" She hesitated, scanned the area again, and leaned in. "Rumors about a local gang. Nothing solid, but enough to make the higher-ups nervous. And the palace hates scandal. If this thing gets any uglier..." He gave a slow nod. Ava was called away before she could say more, and Ron was left standing alone. His gaze settled on the thick stone walls of the courtyard, once symbols of order and safety, now casting long shadows. If there was even a chance those men had criminal connections, Haley could still be in danger. And so could he. Somewhere between protocol and conscience, Ron Holt had chosen the latter, and he wasn't about to back down now. He'd made a promise, whether anyone heard it or not. Haley deserved better than fear, and if no one else would stand in that space between danger and innocence, he would. Ron Holt finished his morning drills under a gray sky that threatened rain. As he returned to the guard station, his mind drifted back to the conversation with Ava Sinclair about the thugs. He couldn't shake the idea that Haley might still be at risk. The palace was supposed to symbolize safety, yet danger lurked just outside its gates. Inside the security office, Ron heard a light knock. When he opened the door, Haley sat just outside, her small hands folded in her lap, a hesitant look on her face. Her chair was still dusty from the streets, but her eyes held something sharper, unease. "Morning," she said quietly, tipping her chin. "Hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all," Ron replied, stepping aside so she could wheel in. "Everything all right?" She rolled to a stop near one of the chairs and adjusted her position. "I wish I could say yes," she murmured. "But something's been bothering me." Ron sat across from her, his expression tightening. "Did something happen?" "Not yet," she said, her voice low, But people I've never seen before have been hanging around my apartment building. Neighbors said they've seen guys just standing out front, asking questions, looking at my floor. A knot tightened in Ron's chest. Could be the same guys, he said under his breath. Or someone they know. Haley nodded, her face pale beneath the soft overhead light. That's what I'm scared of. I'm not exactly fast, you know. And they know where I live now. Ron crossed his arms, thinking quickly. The palace couldn't offer official protection to someone without a clear legal threat, but that didn't mean he had to sit on his hands. Have you talked to the local police? I tried, she said with a sigh. They took my statement, said they'd keep an eye out, but with no video or anything, there's not much they can do. Ron nodded. He knew how systems worked, knew how often they fell short when it really mattered. Is there anyone staying with you? Haley gave a tiny shrug. I live with my grandma, but she works nights. Most of the time it's just me after school. Ron grabbed a notepad from his desk. Give me your address, I'll swing by after my shift, just to check in. Relief softened her posture. I didn't want to bug you, but I trust you. You're the only one who actually did something. Ron jotted the address, his jaw tight with quiet resolve. I'm not sure what I can do within the rules, he said, but I promise I'm not letting them get near you again. Haley placed her hand gently on his forearm. Thank you. Just then, a burst of shouting echoed from outside the office. Ron stood instantly, his senses on high alert. Haley's gaze snapped to the door. They stepped out into the hallway just as Ava Sinclair rushed in from the courtyard, her face serious. Ron, the captain wants you in front. Now, she said breathlessly. Then, catching sight of Haley, her tone shifted. Sweetheart, you might want to stay back. This isn't safe. Haley narrowed her eyes. What do you mean, not safe? Ava hesitated, glanced at Ron, then said, A few guys are outside the main gate, causing a scene, demanding to see the guard who attacked them. Ron felt a spike in his chest. They were back. Haley's hands balled into fists. I'm going, she said. I'm not hiding again. If they're here for me, they can say it to my face. Ron shook his head. It could get ugly. I'm not scared, she said firmly. Not anymore. Ava opened her mouth to argue, but Haley's determination was written across her face like iron. Together they made their way through the corridors, past murmuring guards and curious staff, until they emerged into the open air. A small crowd had already gathered. 3 of the thugs stood just past the gate, minus their ringleader. Their presence was bold, infuriatingly smug. They stood beneath the American flag like they belonged there, tossing accusations as if the palace lawn were their courtroom. That's him, one of them snarled, jabbing a finger toward Ron. He jumped us, for no reason. Ron stood tall, chin lifted. You assaulted a child. If you think that's no reason, then we have very different definitions of justice. We were just talking to her, one said, his voice mocking. Guy went nuts. Captain Leslie Quinn arrived with 2 armed officers flanking her. She stepped forward, arms crossed. You're on private government property, she said coolly. State your business or leave. Now. The thugs didn't flinch. One of them smirked. We want an apology. Maybe some cash, too. Our friend got hurt. Ron clenched his jaw. He got hurt while trying to tip over a wheelchair. The thug's smile cracked. She was lying. That little... Suddenly, Haley rolled forward, her voice slicing through the air. Lying about what? She demanded. About getting pushed? About having my pins ripped off? About you calling me names and saying I was faking being disabled? The men shifted, glancing at one another. Shut up, kid, one muttered. Haley wheeled closer, voice sharp. You want an apology? You want money? From him? She pointed to Ron. You should be behind bars. You came at me like I wasn't even human. One of the guards behind Captain Quinn let out a quiet whistle of approval. Others stood taller. "You messed with the wrong girl," Haley finished. "And I'm not scared of you anymore." A ripple passed through the courtyard. Even the officers looked impressed. Ron stepped forward and rested a steady hand on Haley's chair, proud but composed. The thugs exchanged uneasy looks. Without their leader, their bluster was cracking. Ron Holt finished his morning drills under a gray sky that threatened rain. As he returned to the guard station, his mind drifted back to the conversation with Ava Sinclair about the thugs. He couldn't shake the idea that Marcus Turner might still be at risk. The palace was supposed to symbolize safety, yet danger lurked just outside its gates. Ron gently rested a hand on Haley's shoulder, offering quiet reassurance. "They're twisting the facts," he told Quinn. "They came here to provoke something." Quinn turned to the men with a measured stare. "This is a government-secured zone. You're trespassing. What's your business here?" One of the thugs stepped forward, trying to sound self-assured. "We're just here to set the record straight. Your guard roughed us up. Either you handle him or we go to the press." Ron's jaw clenched at the thinly veiled threat. It wasn't just a bluff, it was a tactic. They knew media pressure could turn a situation sideways, fast. Quinn's expression didn't change, but her silence suggested she was weighing how far this could go. That was when Ava Sinclair stepped into the frame. "Captain, we've collected statements from several bystanders who witnessed them harassing the girl, and we've got security footage from the courtyard." She glanced toward Ron, then back to Quinn. "If the palace authorizes it, we can release footage that clearly shows they initiated the aggression." The color drained from one thug's face. They clearly hadn't expected cameras. We didn't do anything that bad," one of them muttered, voice cracking. Haley gave a bitter, humorless chuckle. "Not that bad?" she echoed. "You mocked my disability, trashed my pins, tried to flip my wheelchair. Want me to keep listing it?" Before anyone else could respond, Quinn raised a hand, her voice sharp and clear. "That's enough." Her gaze swept across the group. "You have 5 seconds to walk off this property before I charge you with criminal trespass. If you have a legitimate complaint, file it through proper legal channels, but you're not going to intimidate my officers or threaten this child." Tension hung thick in the air, but the thugs weren't stupid. They glanced around, noted the officers forming behind Quinn, and realized they were outnumbered. One spat at the ground, the rest muttering as they turned and retreated, their tough guy act unraveling. 2 guards followed them at a distance to make sure they left the grounds. Relief pulsed through the watching crowd. Haley's shoulders slumped, the adrenaline fading fast. Ron knelt beside her again, his voice low. "You all right?" "I will be," she murmured. "But I'm angry." They don't care about anything. Just loud and mean, like that's all they know how to be. Captain Quinn stepped forward, addressing Haley directly. "I'm sorry you had to go through this again. And Ron," she turned to him, her tone more nuanced. "You're still under review, but I'm beginning to understand your reasoning. Sometimes the rule book isn't enough." Ron gave a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am." Quinn looked around at the dispersing crowd. "We'll keep an eye out in case they show up again. If anything happens, contact us immediately." Haley gave a tired smile. "I will. Thanks." As people began to leave, Ron caught the flicker of fear behind Haley's tough exterior. He recognized it for what it was, courage held together by pure willpower. "I'll walk you out," he said, voice quiet enough to keep the moment private. Haley nodded, and together they moved through the grand courtyard. Ron kept close, scanning the edges of the plaza, trying not to let the worst-case scenarios cloud his focus. The thugs showing up here in broad daylight, it wasn't just bold. It was calculated. Someone had put them up to it, or at the very least they were riding a larger current of hate. When they reached the outer gate, Haley stopped. She looked back at the palace, wheels still. "I'm not letting them scare me out of coming here," she said. "I'm an American. I've got every right to visit the places built for all of us." Ron met her gaze, respect etched into his face. "You do. And I'll do whatever I can to make sure you keep that right." Haley gave him a grateful look, then turned forward, pushing her wheels with steady rhythm. "Let them watch," she said under her breath. "I'm not going anywhere." But someone was watching. Ron could feel it. His instincts pricked with every passing second. He knew, without doubt, that this wasn't the end of it. If they came back, if they tried again, he'd be ready. Official orders or not, he would protect her. Ron Holt spent the next few days on edge. The thugs who had confronted Haley in broad daylight might have left, but the threat still lingered. Every time Ron took his post, he scanned the bustling crowds, half expecting them to reappear. Meanwhile, Captain Leslie Quinn quietly authorized more discreet patrols around Haley's neighborhood. Yet no one spotted the men. That changed late one afternoon when Ron received a flustered call from Haley. "They're at my apartment building again," Haley said, voice tense. Neighbors saw them lurking by the back entrance. Ron's pulse spiked. "Stay inside," he urged. "I'm coming right now." He rushed to get clearance from Captain Quinn. She paused for a long beat, clearly weighing the weight of the decision against the strict protocol Ron was already on thin ice for breaking. But when he told her Haley might be in immediate danger, something in her face shifted. "Go," she said, her voice grim. "We'll dispatch backup." Ron drove like every second counted. The sun had already dipped low, bleeding warm colors across the sky as he pulled up near Haley's apartment complex. Shadows stretched long across the cracked sidewalks. He parked fast, left the engine humming, and raced toward the building. Neighbors pointed him to the back stairwell, murmuring about low voices echoing in the dark. He found Haley in the dim hallway, her small hands gripping the arms of her chair, her eyes wide and alert. "You shouldn't be out here," Ron whispered. "I'm not hiding in my own home," she shot back. Her voice shook, but her tone was firm. Before he could say more, a floorboard creaked below. Then came a hissed curse. A familiar, mocking voice slithered up the stairwell. Ron recognized it instantly. The thugs were back, and they were hunting. Ron leaned close. "Stay here," he mouthed. She nodded once, wheeling herself quietly to the wall. Together, they edged toward the stairwell. The lights above buzzed and flickered. At the landing below, two of the same men from the palace courtyard were creeping along, whispering and chuckling like they owned the place. Their backs were turned. "You made a mistake coming here," Ron said, his voice steady and echoing off the tight walls. The men froze. Then they spun around. One lunged at Ron with a wild swing, but Ron ducked and caught the man's arm, slamming him into the railing with swift, controlled power. The second thug cursed and turned to run, but Haley rolled forward just enough to catch his attention. "Running already?" she said, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard. That split-second distraction was all Ron needed. He moved fast, grabbing the second man and shoving him against the wall. Within seconds, both were pinned, groaning. From outside came the wail of sirens, growing louder. Red and blue lights pulsed through the cracks in the stairwell windows as local police and palace reinforcements closed in. The thugs were arrested that night, questioned deep into the evening. Eventually, under pressure and fatigue, they confessed they'd been hired by a minor gang to intimidate Haley, part of a scare tactic, supposedly to silence someone who'd talked too much about neighborhood crime. With confessions, surveillance footage, and multiple eyewitnesses, the charges stuck. For the first time in weeks, Haley could sleep without fear of footsteps outside her door. The days that followed brought a cascade of arrests. Others tied to the same group were swept up. The direct threat to Haley was neutralized. Slowly, cautiously, she began wheeling herself through her neighborhood again, this time with a different expression. Not just alert, proud. A week later, the palace courtyard had been transformed for a formal event. Rows of folding chairs faced a raised platform trimmed in navy and gold. Reporters adjusted tripods while guests murmured in anticipation. At exactly noon, Captain Leslie Quinn stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice ringing through the cool afternoon, We gather today to honor two individuals who reminded us that duty isn't found in uniforms alone, but in action. A hush fell over the crowd. Security Officer Ron Holt risked disciplinary action, risked his career to protect a child. Haley Robinson, 10 years old, faced down her attackers not once, but twice. Together, they stood against fear, and by doing so, helped authorities bring a criminal ring to justice. Polite applause gave way to full-fledged cheering. Ron, standing off to the side in full dress uniform, swallowed hard as the sound hit him. Across the front row, Haley sat in her wheelchair, wearing her signature vest covered in advocacy pins. Their eyes met. She gave him a small, knowing smile. Quinn raised her hand. "Officer Holt, step forward." Ron approached slowly, spine straight. Quinn pinned a polished silver emblem to his chest. "You've shown us that protecting others sometimes requires stepping beyond protocol. In recognition of your courage, we award you this commendation for valor." The cameras flashed. The crowd stood to clap, but the moment wasn't over. Quinn turned toward Haley. "And Haley Robinson," she said, her voice softening. "Though young in age, you showed bravery beyond measure. Your resilience, your voice, your refusal to be silenced. These are not just signs of survival, but of leadership. Today, we recognize you not only for what you endured, but for how you chose to face it." Haley rolled forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke into the mic. "I never thought I'd have to fight just to be seen, but Officer Holt stood with me, and now I know I'm not alone." The crowd stood again, louder this time. Quinn leaned down and pinned a golden medallion onto the front of Haley's vest, right beside her advocacy badge. Some people cheered, some wiped their eyes. And from her chair, Haley turned toward Ron and raised her small hand in salute. Ron returned the salute, his back straight as an arrow, a quiet understanding passing between them that words couldn't capture. After the ceremony, well-wishers drifted forward, some shaking hands, others pausing for photos. Haley chatted easily with a cluster of kids her age, many of them in wheelchairs, a few pointing at the metal gleaming on her vest. Ron received handshakes from strangers who now looked at him differently, people who admitted they'd never considered that a guard's oath might mean putting reputation and even career on the line to do the right thing. As the crowd slowly began to disperse, Captain Quinn approached, resting a hand lightly on Ron's shoulder. "Back to your post," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that hadn't been there before. "You've shown us what it really means to serve. The agency stands behind you." Ron gave a quiet nod, something like gratitude swelling in his chest. "Thank you, Captain." Haley rolled over from the front row, her arms resting on the wheels. She stopped beside Ron. "So, back to just standing around looking serious?" she teased. Ron let a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "My job is to protect," he said. "And it's not about standing still. It's about being ready when it counts." Haley's eyes lit with a spark of admiration far bigger than her years. "Well, you've got it in you, and if I ever roll by again, I'll wave to the guard who proved real heroes still wear uniforms." They exchanged a firm handshake, her small fingers gripping his with more strength than he expected. Then Haley backed her chair away, giving him space to return to duty. Before leaving, she stopped, turned back toward the building, lifted her chin, and gave one crisp salute to the symbol she had once feared, now reclaimed by courage, safety, and pride. Ron stepped into his spot at the entrance, posture tall, eyes steady under the afternoon sun. Tourists would come and go, snapping pictures without ever knowing what had happened on these very grounds just days before. But Ron would remember every second, the moment he chose conscience over protocol, the promise he made and kept. As the clock above the plaza struck the hour, Ron Holt resumed his station with a deeper pride than ever before, a living emblem of what it meant to stand firm, to protect, to serve without hesitation. Far across the square, Haley moved forward with ease, her medal catching the sunlight, her back straight, her spirit whole, her trust restored, and her bravery forever etched in those who had witnessed it. In that final tableau, the bond between a royal guard and an aging veteran stood as a testament to what courage could accomplish. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of Haley and Ron's powerful story. You know, when I wrote this piece, I didn't just want to create action or drama. I wanted to show what real courage looks like. Not the kind wrapped in superhero suits or big speeches, but the quiet, unshakable kind that shows up when no one else does. Ron Holt may wear a guard's uniform, but what made him a hero wasn't the badge. It was the choice he made to step in when everyone else stayed silent. And Haley, 10 years old, in a wheelchair, facing hatred with dignity and fire in her voice. She didn't need to stand tall. That little girl reminded us that bravery doesn't come from strength, but from character. This story is about more than a single act of defiance. It's about humanity, about doing what's right, even when protocol says, stay still. It's about standing up, for someone else, for truth, for the future we all want to believe in. To me, Ron represents the best of what a soldier, a protector, a public servant should be. Not just a follower of orders, but a defender of people, of dignity, of decency. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done in Ron's shoes? Have you ever seen courage like Haley's? Drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs a little hope today. Because sometimes, it just takes one person doing the right thing to change someone's world. And I truly believe we can all be that person. I'll see you in the next story. Stay kind, stay brave, stay